Let's get the latest now from Groenewald. He is the South African ambassador to Ukraine, and he joins us via the virtual platform from Ukraine. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. Can we start with the news just in? And we are reporting that the Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered that his military command, and in particular the so-called deterrence force, be placed on high alert, and this is in apparent reference to units that include nuclear arms. What's your reaction when you hear statements like that?
Of course, and good afternoon to you and the listeners. And our first reaction would be that for now, what we don't want to do is we don't want to contribute to anything that will detract from any dialogue or any discussions or any negotiations or any ceasefire that might be in the offing. Of course, it scares us to hear these things. I am in Kiev. I'm seeing what is happening here every day. And I can tell you that none of us want any escalation. I think we've had enough of this now, and we are hoping for the parties to talk. And this is consistent with the South African position that we have been sharing with everybody, is that we are promoting dialogue. We are hoping that there will be serious dialogue that will lead to a sustainable peace situation. And that's the opposite of having, any weapons and ready for conflict. So we would encourage the parties to please speak to each other and make sure that they sit around the table and that we move to a peaceful situation. You
mentioned, Ambassador, that you are in Kiev. How is the situation there?
It is tense. In the last 2 evenings, we've had some serious attacks on Kiev. What you are seeing in the media is basically what is happening here. It seems that the evenings, or when it's dark at night, the attacks are more frequent. And of course, we are sitting here in the residence. I'm with my family. Some people, everybody is staying indoors with their families, and some people are going into the metros down underground. So we're all very, very worried, and worried about the night that is lying in front of us. Every morning when the sun comes up, we are relieved, that we are still here. So it's a serious situation, and I must say stressful and extremely dangerous.
Earlier, I spoke to a South African student who is studying in that country, and she was in transit on a train that is on its way out of Ukraine. And she mentioned that you were trying to help as much as you could, but you are just one person who also has to look after your own children. What kind of help has been forthcoming from South Africa?
Yeah. No, that's not entirely the full picture, and I know, and I've been speaking to Ansuria, very often every day, and she is at this moment traveling from Venezia to the Hungarian border. You will have seen that there are some difficult issues just due to the sheer numbers on the borders. And what I have agreed with the Hungarian ambassador is for the students to move to Uzhhorod. And from Uzhhorod to be taken over across the border. We've had 2 or 3 people moving over already, and we will follow the same route. And Ansuria is part of that process. And just to make a correction, is that when we say that there's no official evacuation, we don't mean that South Africa and the South African embassy is not involved. I am involved basically for 20 hours of the day. And they are, and my core staff, we are all involved in the process. There are some volunteers, online volunteers, that are assisting us putting lists together, making sure that where people are coming from, aligning where they're going to see if the current situation at those borders are still the same. For example, people will know that we started out with Poland. It seems like the southern borders to Romania is now a better choice, especially for people coming from Odessa, and of course Hungary and Slovakia. So it's a absolutely fluctuating situation, and we are in the middle of it and coordinating all of this. Although we don't have aeroplanes and buses, there are no government really with those kind of resources in the country. But we are helping and assisting with the evacuation, and it is a very, very big operation.
I'm glad you're able to clarify that, but also just give clarity on this statement that was mentioned by Ansuria, the very student you were talking to that we also spoke to. She is quite distressed that the South African government does not seem to have a plan to evacuate them when other countries like India, she mentions that there is a flight that is, I think according to her, going to be dedicated to Indian nationals whose government has chartered this plane, so to speak, in order for them to be evacuated out of the Ukraine, or at least neighboring countries.
Okay. Just to contextualize this, when we speak about India, we speak about 15,000 students that they are busy evacuating. Not busy evacuating, it's exactly the same as us. They're coming through in buses. And I mentioned the bringing over of students through Hungary. We are actually working very closely with the Indian and the buses that are being provided, the transport that are being provided from Uzhhorod, where they stop with the train and then brought in across the border. We are doing this with India, so it's a combined project together with Hungary. With regards to the evacuation on the other side, we are not expecting to have, even the 200 that you mentioned earlier in the program. The number of students that I've seen at the maximum for now is about 50. So hopefully our plan will be then to go to the airlines and see if we can have some kind of arrangement. And this is not necessarily done through the government. Government will assist, of course, because it's just part of the process. But through private people that are trying to negotiate with airlines to get our people back in South Africa. But so the first phase of all of this is now to get them out, and then the next phase we will engage on. And our ambassadors in Hungary and in Poland are actually at the borders to assist. But, and that's where they take over with the second part of the process.
All right, and I'm glad that you mentioned that there are ambassadors who are standing in wait and looking for people like Ansuria Moodley, who is on her way out of the Ukraine. In a moment, Ambassador, I'm going to ask you to stay with us, because when we return, I want to talk to you about reports that have been coming through suggesting that while neighboring countries are happy to welcome Ukrainian nationals, Africans, though, are being turned away. And we're going to latch on to that conversation in a moment. You watching Politics Unscripted. If you're just joining us, we are talking to South Africa's ambassador to Ukraine. That's André Groenewald, and he is talking to us. He's talking to us from the capital city, Kiev. And my understanding is that the ambassador may still be with us. Ambassador, are you there? All right. The ambassador is trying to reconnect. All right. I'm told now that the ambassador is there. Ambassador Groenewald, thank you very much for staying with us. Can we continue from that point where you said that the neighboring countries like Poland, so South Africa's ambassador to Poland will be standing in wait, hoping to receive South Africans who are leaving Ukraine. The reason behind this, Ambassador, are you able to tell us whether it's as a result of the reports that say Ukrainian nationals are being welcomed in these neighboring countries, however, Africans are being turned away?
Yeah, let me start with the context, is that there are major numbers at the borders. The Hungarian ambassador said to me that on their side there's about 21,000, and there's way more than on the Polish side. So there's a lot of people. The second part is that there is a prioritization of Ukrainian women and children at some stage. That impacts also on other foreign nationals that are coming through. And of course, when you can make a clear distinction between the foreign nationals, it is easier to then say no, but you're not part of the priority. We have objected to this vociferously. To say that in a war situation, bombs are not making any discrimination between people. Mm-hmm. We want our people to be brought through the borders. I have spoken to the Polish ambassador. He has agreed that they will send another note verbal from their side, from the Polish side to the Ukrainian side, to ask to let people through immediately, because that was the excuse at some stage. And of course, in these kind of situations, there are going to be quite a number of excuses. And of course, what we need to do is to just put more pressure. And of course, that's why our ambassador in Poland is now at the border, putting also pressure on the system there.
Are you able to tell us, Ambassador Groenewald, how many South Africans were in the Ukraine at the start of the war? You may not necessarily be able to account for South Africans who are there now, but at the start of this war, are you able to give us a figure roughly of South African nationals who are there?
Yeah, I will be very surprised if we have 200. I've worked specifically with people that I've seen, students. I've worked with about 50. There was another probably 50 other South Africans that are either married with the Ukrainians or here for work purposes. It's very, very difficult. And every single day, there's at least 2, 3, 5, whatever, a number more, that phone me or make contact with us. And this is, the reason for this is that South Africans normally don't register at the embassy. They don't tell us that they... So we, in most of the cases, because of the COVID situation 2 years ago, and in Georgia as well, and that started with a WhatsApp group, and then it grew because the students were also having, so it was a pragmatic process of them ensuring that they remain in contact with the embassy because there was an issue. The others, they only come in when there's a challenge, and so when there's a big situation like we have now, we don't always know who's where, and of course, again, the fluctuation of us, by the time that you register and by the time that you contact us, you might be in different parts of the country.
Yeah. Ambassador, the line to you is slightly becoming patchy, and I'm worried that I'm going to lose you at any moment. So let me change this conversation and sort of bring in the element about the politics in this now.
Yeah.
The African voice. How important is the African voice in what is taking place between Russia and Ukraine? How important is that voice, and particularly the weight of that voice?
Yeah, like I said right in the beginning, what we don't want to do is we don't want to detract from anything that can get us to a peaceful situation. But what we need to say also, and as President Ramaphosa has said, and he encouraged the mediation, which is part of the broader dialogue process. But if you look at the history of South Africa, that was brought about by a process of negotiation. It was a process of talking to each other, of dialogue. If you look at where we have been involved in being a facilitator towards peace, it's always been that, bringing the South African example. If that can contribute at the UN in terms of taking us forward. And so Africa has a huge voice, and it's important that the African voice is heard, because in the end of the day, everything that happens in a war situation, in a conflict situation, is to the detriment of everybody. And the first indicator of that is the oil price. There are many other issues regarding, foodstuffs and the food basket, inflation, insecurity, all of these kind of things. And I think as a world family, the African voice is part of it. And if you look at South Africa, our contribution as a responsible member of this international community is there to be heard. And we have been very solid in providing that feedback.
Ambassador, you use the words that South Africa's position has been quite solid. There is the view, though, Ambassador, that with the context that you've painted, a very colorful one, particularly when it comes to South Africa and how we got out of the apartheid situation, was as a result of putting pressure and getting international allies. There is, though, the view, Ambassador, that the silence of African leaders in taking a position on what has been labeled by EU leaders as Russia's invasion of a sovereign state. There is a view that either you have been silent, or if you're not silent, you have sought to take a neutral position that says, let's encourage dialogue. The fact of the matter is that Russia has invaded Ukraine. Is that not what has happened?
You know, our priority in this case, like I've said, is to contribute to peace. For us to now go and look for any other indications or voices or anything that might detract from that would be irresponsible. So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying people, it's for each country to decide what they want to do. We have been very strong in our statement, and we have been, giving a position. It is not our place to tell other countries, how they should contribute and what they should be saying. I think from our side is to caution everybody is that if there is a process and if there's a suggestion towards negotiations, which there seems to be, it is our contribution now is to just contribute to it so that we can get to that table and have this dialogue forming. And I think that's the most important part. We need to contribute to peace now and not contribute to, maybe pressurizing other countries that might, that feel that they are sitting with their own, situations in their own countries or regions.
Yeah. Ambassador, can I ask you this question? It's quite a simple one, really. Do you go along with the Russian position that there is no war taking place in Ukraine? In fact, what they are saying is happening is a special military operation to liberate Ukraine. Do you go along with that as South Africa?
Yeah, we have to be very careful of just, having a blanket statement and then we agree with this and with a yes or a no answer. I think there's a lot of definitions in there. There's a lot of history in that question. And that all of those factors are probably elements of a negotiations. And again, we need not get ourselves into a situation where we detract from any of those things that you have mentioned, including the context, including the definition of whatever you mentioned in your statement now, and of course the overall history of where we're coming from. I think the history needs to be addressed, and I think that it might actually lead us and provide us with an opportunity in future to address things that might not have been on the table. Yeah. And it might be beyond this part of the world. And so, in any of these big issues, there's always an opportunity for us. You talked about the voice of Africa, but maybe to address some of the things that people have been saying for a long time. You know what? We need to sit around the table and negotiate. And so, not to go into defining issues specifically, and definitely not to have generalizations, either concurred with or not. Again, back to the priority. Let's support any peace process.
All right. With those words, Ambassador, I'm letting you go. It's a final question. The earlier question I asked you right at the beginning was as a result of the breaking news, and these were reportedly the words of the president of Russia, who was saying that a deterrence force, and in particular there's a reference to a unit on nuclear arms that needs to be put on high alert. Is that worrying, Ambassador? Because what we learned on Thursday night already was that Russian forces had reportedly seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine. Is that a worrying factor when you hear these latest statements?
The worrying factor is that if we look at escalation as a linear process, the first part being peace, the middle part being where we are at now, and a possible later path would be the escalation with more serious weapons. None of us want that. We want to move back to that first phase where we have peace. And if that linear situation with a worry, then I am worried, because we are worried that we have escalation. We are worried that more serious guns are being imported into this, or weapons into this process. And if it can be explained in that sense, I think then I can say because we are moving away from peace.
All right, that's Ambassador Andre Groenewald, and he is South Africa's ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and please stay safe with your family.